How do we grow this influence of black leaders, men and women, that can represent our industry inside the ANC, inside the policy-making structures?
Get to grips with the digital environment, put together best practices, what works and what doesn't, very importantly.
In the project that we're doing in Chatlath, we've created a linking bridge between those two little areas there. So it becomes a matter of just 10 minutes walk from one side to the other.
So my message to our CEOs and those chief investment officers is, where at the end of the day do you want to see your role?
So by treating all of our water back to a stage where we can bring it back into the process, we're in effect saving around about 35% of our water usage on site.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Youth and the Green Economy. My name is Nolwazi Mbhele, and today we are going to be talking about GIS and the environment. Today I have my special guest, Mihle Nxolo, and also expert in this field of GIS, Chris Whyte. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris.
How are you doing?
I'm good, and you?
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't know if you guys want to do like a quick introduction of yourself. Just tell us what you guys do, and then yeah, we'll take it from there. Mihle?
Okay. I'm Mihle, a third-year student at CPUT, majoring with GIS. So I think that's why Nolwazi asked me to be here. So I'm very interested in environmental management, and let me just, yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, so Chris Whyte, obviously my focus is circular economy, has been for the last 20 years. But I think what a lot of people don't understand about me is that where my origins come from. I was actually graduated as a geologist. And when I was a long-haired, believe it or not, layabout student with a serious drinking habit to support, I needed to find a job, and I started working with the Institute of Natural Resources. In those days, my job was to watch the pens. We had these old ink pen plotters, and my job was to make sure that the inks didn't run out and that the paper didn't get scratched. But I taught myself GIS during that day, and that was before all these nice fancy Windows things and everything else. So we had to use the DOS-based systems and really understand the engineering behind it. But I used it very successfully. So I never practiced as a geologist. I opened up my own company. Doing international consulting across Africa, probably been to 40 African countries, using GIS as a tool in multiple applications. So it started off with geology, because I started doing the assessment of mineral deposits using geobotanical anomaly identification from satellite imagery. And that just grew into all sorts of other things, and ultimately that got me into circular economy, but that's a long story.
Okay, thank you very much. I was about to say that I think some of us actually don't really plan to do GIS until we actually get introduced into it. I think that's what happened with me. I didn't know much about GIS, and then I did geotechnology, and then that's when I got to actually use GIS as a tool. My first question is, using GIS in the waste management sector, how do they use that? How is it?
There's a lot of different applications. So firstly, we need to understand that in Africa, we hardly use it. We're miles behind the rest of the world in terms of using spatial management systems, not necessarily GIS, but it's the same sort of thing. Specifically in waste management. So there are a couple of organizations in South Africa that use it to manage the routes that the dump trucks use. And so it looks at everything from real-time spatial information, traffic information, but also looking at the route planning to minimize the distance traveled and to maximize their volume, so that they can try and keep the costs low with regards to waste management. Those systems that are in place are by far more efficient than those that are unmanaged. And so the information then is able to track and trace. And we haven't got quite as detailed with some of our stuff where internationally they can actually measure what's going into each truck, where it's collected. And then they can understand exactly what waste is going where it's being sourced from, and which landfill site it's going to. So there's a lot more we can do using the available technology, but it's a brilliant system, and it's ultimately it's about saving money and creating efficiencies in the collection system.
Mm-hmm. And then, what would you say are the challenges in terms of implementing GIS in developing countries such as South Africa or any other African country?
Well, there shouldn't be any challenges. I mean, the reality is that GIS is such an easy, accessible software. The opportunity in terms of using GIS is, I could name you every single sector that would be able to use it. But the reality is that your cost of entry into using spatial or geographic information systems is very small compared to infrastructural costs, whether you're in manufacturing, waste management, collection, or in the environmental agricultural sector. So the barrier to entry is not there. The barrier that we have is the lack of resources. And I think often what we see in terms of GIS and the application at the university level is that we're not seeing enough of the practical applications as to what sectors and opportunities we can develop and unlock across the country. So there's it's a skills thing. We've got a lot of people coming out with GIS skills. We've got to put them into the right places, match them up with the right people. But it's a fantastic tool for any application.
All right. Mihle, do you have a question?
Yeah, he also mentioned that there are no challenges as such, but I'm just wondering, isn't like a challenge like what's the word? Isn't like a challenge to install, and like doesn't it take time to install the application? And I'm not sure if you're getting my question.
No, absolutely. The challenges are limited. If you look at the fact you can buy GIS software off the shelf, it's inexpensive, relatively inexpensive. I mean, for an individual, it's not that cheap, but for an organization, it's a very small spend. There's training available. The systems have all got solid training platforms for them. But also there's a lot of youngsters coming out of varsity with GIS skills who are able to apply them in those sectors. So the gap is really in terms of the application. And again, I come back to that. So if I look at some of the stuff that I got involved with at universities, it was a case of how do we draw a map? And a river is blue and a road is brown, and a boundary is black, and we make it look pretty, and that's not GIS. That's graphics. So the real skill in terms of GIS is understanding the data behind it. The spatial interface is simply a means of projecting data. And that's what the focus is all about. And one of the problems we have is that we don't have enough data in this country. So we've got to collect information. We need to shore up our investment in terms of adequate data collection systems. Whether we're looking at social, economic, or environmental data applications, we need more information. So even if waste, you were talking about waste, Nolwazi, we don't have a proper management system in this country to tell us what waste we have where. So if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so data is important. So GIS is an opportunity, but we need to plug the databases behind that GIS so that we can use the information adequately.
Mm-hmm. And then as environmental management students, I think we more focused on EIA, which is environmental impact assessment. May you please just tell us how GIS can be used as a tool for that EIA, which is also a tool for environmental development?
Absolutely. In my time, I've done hundreds of EIAs using GIS, and it is the perfect tool. What it does is it allows you to integrate different levels of information, whether you're looking at, again, social, environmental, or economic data. Those can all be interacted and overlaid. So if you're looking at social, it could be boundaries in terms of population. It could be in terms of individual houses. If you're looking at environmental, it could be assessing, where are your rivers, your wetlands, the buffers, your forests, your sensitive vegetation areas. When you're looking at it from an economic perspective, you need to look at your infrastructure. So where are your roads, your power lines, your water conduits, your servitudes. That information all gets overlaid together. And GIS is probably one of the only tools that can actually do that and take information from very different levels to inform across spectrums. So when you're starting to look at something like we would call a negative mapping exercise, we need to identify a new landfill site. The idea would be that you lay over multiple layers of information, and you rank them according to sensitivity. So, which are go areas, which are no-go areas. So if you're putting in a layer of rivers, for example, you would put in a buffer on those rivers based on a 100-year floodline. You would put buffers around your wetlands. You need to understand, again, from a legislative perspective, any application within 500 meters of a wetland would be applicable to a water use license assessment, which is a complicated and expensive and problematic approach. So you need to look at it for mapping all those different components together, which you can't do from a physical or a visual assessment. And GIS allows you to integrate that right across the spectrum to look at anything from visual impact to economic and social impact.
Mm-hmm. And then before the show, we actually spoke about the new census. I think you spoke about that. Maybe please just, what exactly was that?
Well, the census is a vital piece of information. Again, we always talk about if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So the measuring of the population is vitally important, but you need to know where they are. Not only where they are, but you need to know information. So what are the relative incomes of people in different areas? That will impact any future planning with regards to roads and infrastructure, water provision, agriculture, looking at transport and logistics and any other basic infrastructure. So you need to understand where the population are. You need to understand where the needs are. You need to understand where the money is. And you need to understand what the existing infrastructure requirements are. So the census is a vitally important piece of information for the future planning of any country. And people often don't, they're trying to avoid the census, or they lie on the census forms, because they think it's government sneaking in trying to find out information about them. It's got nothing to do with that. They can't track and trace a single individual. Data is agglomerated from a micro to a macro level to allow strategic planning from an economic perspective for a country. So census data is absolutely vital. I cut my teeth on developing census systems for South Africa. I know the guys that I worked with are still doing it. And the systems have just got more complicated and more integrated and far more practical and efficient in terms of what you can do with that information. So census is something where we've got to look at it and regard it in terms of what it's designed for. It's designed as a planning tool, and it comes back about data. Data is everything.
Okay, I have a question regarding the information and the experience like you have about GIS. Like, what's there? Like, you also mentioned that you do trainings, right? What's there that people are not aware of about GIS and that they can learn from your organizations, and please unpack that.
Well, you're not going to learn from me. As I said, the last time I looked at a GIS system was probably in 2008. So I'm probably not the best person in terms of the training, but there are great organizations out there. And there are universities that do it. I'm still of the opinion that to have a degree in GIS doesn't make sense. That would be the same as an author getting a degree in Microsoft Word. The reality is GIS is a tool. It's not a degree. I have a master's in GIS from City University of London. So when I started doing all this work, GIS started becoming well known. And the work that I was doing with the American USAID and the British DFID and the Japanese governments, they were starting more and more to ask that the senior project managers had at least a master's degree in GIS. I probably could have taught the course, so I wanted to look elsewhere and see what I could do. If there was somebody outside of South Africa that would know more than me. And I chose the City University of London, and I got my master's degree. And I have to be honest, I didn't learn anything new, but I've got an MSc behind my name. And it's really about the application of the tool. So as I said, an author doesn't have a degree in Microsoft Word. An author is a researched and a knowledgeable person in their field. So if you look at my application in terms of waste and waste management, my knowledge is not how to run a dump truck. My knowledge is different, but I pull on that knowledge in different perspectives to try and bring together information that allows me to make decisions. And that's what GIS does. GIS it's an agglomerator of information that allows for better and more informed decision making.
Right.
All right. And on that note about careers and stuff, so I know that GIS can be used in different environmental sectors. What would be your advice for us as youngsters who are still, learning more? What careers do you think would be the right careers for us to venture into using GIS?
Sorry, can I add something?
Sure.
Mhm.
I was gonna ask that question, like something similar. Like also like what modules can we add, like outside of the modules that we're doing at the moment? Like what other modules can we add, like that go in hand with geotechnology?
Absolutely. Well, it's understanding, coming back to what I said, GIS is a tool. So the idea is to apply your basic sciences. So whether that's geology, geography, hydrology, biochemistry, engineering, conservation, whatever it might be, that is your knowledge.
Okay.
GIS is the tool to be able to bring that knowledge together into a format that's easier to represent, to make decisions. That's what it is. It's a tool. It's very complicated, some of the science and maths behind it, and I haven't touched it since 2008. I know some of the guys that I'm working on it now. They have learned so much. You continue to learn because the tool gets better. The applications get better. So we're using it in a number of different applications, and that's where we need to understand when you're looking at a career in GIS. I still think you need to have a career in something else. You need to be a geologist who knows how to use GIS. So I've used it extensively, for example, for mapping the KZN coalfields, where I'm able to use it in three-dimensional spatial systems to map out borehole data. And that will allow me to understand where the best coal is and what mining methods we can apply to that, and what the extraction methodologies and efficiencies are, and how far it is from the closest rail track and to the closest market, and understand the economics behind it. So it's a tool in terms of bringing together your knowledge in your field. So if you're an environmental practitioner, you need to understand the impacts that would influence environmental assessments. It would be visual, it would be aesthetic, it would be the sort of socioeconomic, it would be infrastructure. So you understand all the different components that come into it. You can't really have a career in GIS, as far as I'm concerned. I think GIS is a tool, but you can be really good at it. And that's where you now look at some of the information that's coming through on a programming perspective, where there are data science students doing amazing crunching of information, and being able to pull that together from a spatial perspective, where the data scientists, the guys with the big thick glasses and the big brains, which you and I don't understand, but they're able to put it into something that we can understand because it's a nice, pretty picture. And that helps us. It helps us take it to politicians who need nice, pretty pictures to make decisions. So that's what it is. It's a decision-making tool.
And then earlier on, you mentioned that there isn't a lot of data, especially in South Africa, because I know I had a project earlier this year where I had to, pick a topic on how we can use GIS for the environment. And for me, it was through urban planning. And then I struggled finding data. What are the ways that you can say we can better, collect data?
Capture it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the early days when I was involved in GIS, we were the guys who were capturing a lot of that data. So all of your 1 in 50,000 topographic maps, your 1 in 250, 1 in a million maps, all of the information in terms of the rivers, the boundaries, the pipelines, the servitudes, somebody had to capture all of that. So I think a lot of what happens now is that people just say, where's the data? We had to digitize it. And I remember those old days of sitting with a digitizer, logging information in, day out. And that was the grind behind GIS. And there's always going to be somebody who has to do that. Data changes all the time. So we need to keep entering information. We need to keep updating information. But we also need to address the issue of quality of data. And that can be frustrating. So any of you who's done GIS with a map, and you're taking information on a cadastral boundary, for example, and matching that with rivers, you will know that somebody has not matched the same river with that cadastral boundary, if that cadastral boundary is on a river. So now you have two lines that are kind of squiggling across each other, and it just looks dirty and uncomfortable. And that's data quality issues. So, we need to look at those. We need to understand the data is captured at different scales. So, you try and match information at a 1 in 10,000 level, on a 1 in 50,000 map, it doesn't look right because it's just done at a different scale. But we need to understand those issues. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But if you can't find the data, you've got to capture it. And that's the hard work behind GIS. The easy stuff's making pretty maps. The hard stuff is capturing the data.
Mihle?
Well, I don't have a question now. He just unpacked everything. I think I wanted to know about GIS, so I don't have a question.
Okay, but I am curious. Before, when you were still learning, what really fascinated you about GIS?
What I loved about it was the sudden realization that better decisions can be made with better information. So a lot of the work that we were doing, when I was doing that grind, and I was capturing information of 1 in 10,000 maps, and I kept thinking to myself, this is so boring. What is the point behind this? But when you get it to the end point and you start to collate that information and use it, now you're buffering certain information and you're creating thresholds using scientific algorithms to look at the juxtaposition of item A versus item B, and you start to see spatial dimensions in 3 or 4 dimensions. It starts to show you how data is so vitally important in terms of every single aspect. And I remember a long time ago, I used to give presentations at schools and at universities in terms of GIS. I mean, I was a big GIS fundi. And I used to use the argument of, with school kids, where do your cornflakes come from in the morning? And they kind of look at you as if you're stupid. But when you start to unpack it and get them to understand that cornflakes don't come out of a box, out of the OK or out of Spar, they come from the field. Which field? How far away is that field? Is that field, did they produce one type of mealie or a different type of mealie? Which area did it go to? So now they've got to transport that crop into a silo. Where is the closest silo that makes economic sense? From the silo, it then goes to the production plant. From the production plant, it then goes to a packaging plant. From the packaging plant, it goes to a distribution center. From the distribution center, it goes to the shop. From the shop, it goes to you. People don't understand that. They don't understand there's this huge thing that's behind the bowl of cornflakes in the morning. So it's understanding everything with regards to source to completion. And it is used in multiple applications. So even in the growing of that corn, the work that I was doing 15, 20 years ago, we were looking at using satellite imagery to determine the suitability of soils for the management of particular types of crops. When they started looking at GMO introductions into South Africa, they needed to look at understanding the crops. When you look at energy now, the maps that have been done in terms of solar irradiation, that best place your solar panels are all done on maps. Your wind applications for wind energy are all done on maps. Everything's mapped so we can make better decisions as to where to place infrastructure and opportunities. So you've got to realize that GIS is a huge part of everybody's lives. Just very few of us know that it ever happened in the background.
Mihle, do you have one last question before we close the show?
Not that I can think of.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Stunned you into silence.
Okay, I think I have one last question. And my question is, do you think that there is a future for GIS and the environment, especially in South Africa as a developing country? Do you think that we still need new, bright, innovative young minds, or yeah?
Absolutely. GIS is not going anywhere. GIS is an amazing tool. It's going to continue to be amazing. The tools are getting more complicated and more efficient and more diverse in terms of what they can do. There's a huge opportunity for youngsters, and that's why it's important that GIS is taught at universities. But again, remember, it's a tool. You don't get a degree in GIS. You get a degree in something that you understand, and GIS is the tool that you use. And there's opportunities in absolutely every aspect of life. So look at those opportunities. So whether it's in mining, engineering, agriculture, infrastructure, logistics planning, supply chain management, retail, distribution, marketing, understanding the development of the entire country from a sustainable economic development perspective. GIS is a tool that is doing all of that, and we need a lot more of it. We've got a little bit of mismanagement in this country at the moment, and GIS can make it a little bit better.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we did learn a lot, Mihle.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much. That was good.
Thank you so much, Chris. This was lovely.
Only a pleasure. Always, Nolwazi.
Thank you. Right. Okay. This was lovely. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me this week. Join us next week again when we have another topic. We're going to announce it. Thank you, guys. Bye.
How do we grow this influence of black leaders, men and women, that can represent our industry inside the ANC, inside the policy-making structures?
Get to grips with the digital environment, put together best practices, what works and what doesn't, very importantly.
In the project that we're doing in Chatlat, we've created a linking bridge between those two little areas there. So it becomes a matter of just 10 minutes walk from one side to the other.
So my message to our CEOs and those chief investment officers is, where at the end of the day do you want to see your role?
So by treating all of our water back to a stage where we can bring it back into the process, we're in effect saving around about 35% of our water usage on site.